Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. It's been quite a while since my last Marvel Select review, and today I'm pleased to be sharing with you my thoughts on the latest release, which is Captain America. Now, we've had a few Captain Americas in this line before, but this is the first one we've had since Marvel Select have upped their game in terms of accessories and articulation, so I'm quite excited to get my hands on a classic Captain America. So as ever, let's kick off by taking a look at the packaging. Now, we all know and love the oversized packaging, and this is pretty standard from Marvel Select. It is good chunky packaging. We have the clamshell packaging there, so it is mostly window display. We can see the figure and all of his various bits and pieces. We have the shield icon in the bottom left hand corner, and of course we have the borders there that's made up of a collage of different elements from different comic books across the years. This is quite attractive. This has worked with them now for about, I want to say 20 plus years. Might be getting closer to 30 years, but hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And this still looks really nice and displayable. It still looks good after all this time. And if we look at the side panel, we can see this nice striking image here of Captain America. No text, this looks really, really good. This is fantastic if you want to put this on display on its side profile, lining up with other figures in the collection. Looks pretty attractive, very eye-catching. It's often inconsistent with Marvel Select. You never quite know whether they're going to go for a classic illustrated image or if they're going to go for a photo of the figure. Obviously, they've adopted the illustration here. Then if we look at the back of the packaging, we actually have some really nice photography of the figure with his various looks, and again, this is largely text-free. There's a little bit of bio at the top of the package in there, but all in all, this looks very attractive. It's very well presented and looks pretty good. First impressions upon opening him up is that, yep, he looks pretty good. He looks in nice proportion, and he looks pretty authentic to what I would expect a classic Captain America to look like. So I think he looks bright and colourful, and yeah, in terms of sculpting, this looks pretty apt. Now, if we look at the head sculpt, I think they've done a pretty nice job with this. Again, it's difficult to pick any one particular comic book as your source, but I think generically this is a good Cap likeness. In terms of the paint apps, quite interesting. We can actually see, of course, that they've got the blue of the face mask there. We have some flesh tones around the face, and there's some different paint apps around the chin there to add a few different flesh tones, which is quite nice. And then we have some shading on the top of the head. Now, this is an interesting choice because it's a little bit like cell shading, it's a little bit of shadowing. Personally, I really quite like this. Some purists may not be as keen, but I think this works really well, and I think it looks really good without being distracting and looking pretty authentic to what you'd see on the comic book page. So I think they've done a nice job with this. The proportion of the A seems apt as well. This doesn't look too big or too small, and I think they've got this pretty much nailed down. I really like the body sculpt. I'm not sure if we've seen this used elsewhere before. This looks new to me, but I might be mistaken on that. But it looks really good. And what's nice is that we can actually see some of the chainmail effect, the scale mail, I suppose, actually sculpted in. But it's not too much that it's everywhere. It's just subtle in little places here and there. And then, of course, we have some nice paint apps, a little bit of shadowing and shading in key places, just to bring out and emphasize some of the finer sculpt details. Again, not too much, not too little, looks really good, and I think they've got the balance just right here. If I was being slightly more critical, I'm not quite sure about the scale of the star. This looks slightly out of proportion to me. There's nothing particularly wrong with it, but it just looks a little bit too fat for my liking. Whereas if we flip it and look at the reverse of the figure, I really like the star here. This looks much more appropriate to my eyes, and I think this looks really good. Again, we have some of the paint apps, the washes running through the back of this figure as well, so it wraps right the way around, and I think this looks pretty good. Now, the figure comes with a number of different hands, which we'll take a look at later, but I'm quite pleased that the one in the box comes with this pointing finger, something we do associate with Cap, giving his orders and directing people, and I think this is kind of cool. So I'm glad that we actually have this particular pointing hand. I think this looks really quite good. And again, the gauntlets look correct in terms of proportion, and they're nicely painted, and we can see a little bit of a wash running through that, a bit of a black wash there, just to add and draw out some of the fine detailing, which is fantastic. Likewise, if we look at the boots, we can see there's a little bit of a paint wash running over this to make it look like they've seen action, like they've been through the mud, which is kind of cool. Again, giving it a little bit of depth and texture, which just makes this figure pop all in all, especially for a figure actually that is relying on primary bright colours. It gives that a little bit of extra nuance, a little bit of extra texture, which a figure like this really needs, and I think it works an absolute treat, and it doesn't compromise the overall brightness and colourfulness of the figure itself, which is great. Looking at the articulation then, he does have a ball joint at the top of the neck, and there's also one at the base of the neck as well, allowing the head to spin all the way around 360 degrees, and it will wobble left and right, but I wouldn't say it's really particularly posable in this area. Now he can bend his head forward quite a distance using those two joints together, and he can go back a little bit as well. There's a ball joint in the shoulder, of course, and there is a complementary bicep swivel there as well. There's a double joint at the elbow, allowing the arm to arch to about 45 degrees. There is a swivel at the top of the gauntlet there as well, allowing that to rotate all the way around. And then we have a pin swivel at the wrist, allowing the hand to rotate around and, of course, hinge forwards and backwards, a pretty healthy distance as well. Now, there's 2 points of articulation in the torso. There's a straight swivel at the waist, allowing the figure to rotate all the way around there. But then we also have a ball joint in the chest. Now, this will allow the figure to move from side to side. It takes a bit of persuasion, but it can be done. There's a little bit of a wobble here, but I wouldn't say it moves left and right a great deal, nor can it really bend forwards backwards, and this feels a little bit redundant really, which is a shame. There's ball joints in the hips, allowing the legs to kick out to the side. They'll kick forwards and go backwards a little bit. There's a double joint at the knee, allowing that lower leg to kick all the way back there. There's a swivel at the top of the boot cut, and then we have an ankle pivot as well, where that foot can hinge forwards and backwards, but also rock from side to side. Now, I love the sheer amount of accessories we get with this Marvel Select cap because he comes with an additional 5 hands. We have 2 closed fists, we have 2 open palms, and we have a gripping hand there as well, which is pretty cool stuff. We also have a belt, a utility belt that can be added on here, as well as utility straps to hold his shield. There's 2 alternate heads, a classic 1940s head and an unmasked Steve Rogers head, and we even have an unfurled mask. And of course, where would a cap be without his trusty shield? So we get not just one shield, we get his round circular shield, which we all know and love, but we also get his classic 1940s star shield as well, which is pretty cool. Both of these shields are very nicely painted, and they have this fantastic feature on the back where you can actually see the strap so he can grip that with his hands, but this actually unclips and there's a peg underneath that will allow you to fit it into the straps on his back, and you can hold either of these shields in this position, which is a really nice clever touch, and it works an absolute treat. Now, between all of these accessories, there's an absolute ton amount of looks that you can create and poses and displays you can use for this character. It feels like the possibilities are almost endless, and you can have hours of fun playing with different looks, depending on what your personal preference is for Cap. I really quite like having all the bits and pieces together, having the utility belt, having the straps and the shield on his back. I think this looks absolutely top notch, and for me, this is my Captain America. This is the look that I most associate with the character, and I think the simplistic design is pretty much perfect for me. I love this. I also like really having the Steve Rogers head there as well. The unmasked head I think is a really cool touch, and I think it looks really good. The unfurled mask actually slots into place quite easily, which is nice. And in terms of the head sculpt, I'm not mad about it, I've got to be honest. I don't think this is the best Steve Rogers head sculpt I've ever seen. I think it does the job, and the paint apps are really nice. There's plenty of detailing in the hair there to make it look realistic and authentic, which is great. I did notice some blotching on the skin tone of my Steve Rogers. If it looks a little bit like maybe he has a rash. I'm not sure if I've been unlucky there, if that is something that's running through all of these figures. But if we put that to one side, I have to say I think this is really quite striking. Again, it's a really cool, good look for this character that is definitely different to what we've had before, which I really appreciate. And then I think the pièce de résistance is having the 40s timely version of Captain America. I think this is a really clever touch. It's not my personal favourite cap, but I do really appreciate having the option to have this cap on display. I don't think we've ever seen it before, certainly not from Marvel Select, and there's no denying that this feels quite fresh and new for a Captain America figure, and I really appreciate the option that we've got here. Okay, so final thoughts from me. I'm going to give this figure 4 stars, and I was very close to giving it 5 stars, but I have to withdraw one. Now, overall, I think this is a really strong figure. I think it's another great release from Marvel Select. I really like the sculpting that we've got. I love that we have all these fantastic accessories and we can create these fantastic different looks for this one figure. I think it's brilliant, real value for money there. And I think the sculpting is really well done, and the paint apps for the most part are really great. However, I'm definitely taking a star off for some of the issues with the paint apps when it comes to the Steve Rogers face, where there's a little bit of blotching here and there, and also that upper torso joint feels a little bit redundant. It feels like it should offer a little bit more than it is, and it just feels slightly useless, really, and it just maybe feels like that needed to be worked through a little bit more. But other than that, this is still a fantastic figure, and one of the better Captain America figures I have from any scale, actually. If you enjoyed this video, please do give it a like, and remember to subscribe as there'll be plenty more videos soon.